Hello, and welcome to 50Faces TV. In this episode, we're going to talk about the Nordic region and the institutional investment landscape there. I'm joined today by Alec Lingorski, new MD of Alvine Capital, a European-focused placement agent founded in 2005 and a recent winner of Private Equity Wire European Placement Agent of the Year. Welcome, Alec. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Nice to see you.
So can you paint a picture of the institutional investment landscape in the Nordics?
Sure. So we, just a little bit, I think it paints a better picture of the whole region, but we've been working on the Nordic region for the past 20 years across asset classes. In the last sort of 5-6 years, it's been more on the private equity side and private credit side, but we do have some exposure to the more liquid side and have an understanding of what people think. I guess the Nordic region is people see it as one kind of homogenous place, but I would say it's much more differentiated within each of the countries and within the types of institutions within the countries, depending on, I guess, how public they are, a little bit how they're set up, what stakeholders they have, etc. So it's not a sort of generalist, very high sustainability everywhere. But I think from a sort of global perspective, the Nordics are 10 years ahead of everyone else when it comes to ESG and sustainability, just generally. It's much more baked into their thinking. It's much more baked into their processes and the sort of investment due diligence that they do. But it varies very much depending on who they are. So, I mean, to give you a few examples, if you look at the Swedish groups, they have state, various buffer funds and state pensions in Sweden, which are talking about being consolidated now. But a few of them have gone on the private markets, specifically private equity, have gone fully impact. So they used to have a much broader mandate, but have now in recent years converted that to fully impact. Other groups have less of a impact angle, and they're much more returns driven. But I think as a sort of red line through everything, ESG is important, and it always comes up. And we work a lot with US managers, on the private and public side. And there's a little bit of training that needs to be done in what they need to reach in terms of certain parameters and benchmarks around ESG and sustainability. And
when you mentioned impact and sustainability investing, is there any particular focus there?
It's much more on trends. I mean, if you take ES and G separately, I mean, social inclusion, diversity is a big theme. I mean, on the environmental side, water scarcity, energy transition, food, agriculture. It can be quite broad theme. So it's defined by each institution in a different way. And they set their mandates and the themes that they want to follow. And it doesn't have to mean it's an ESG fund or an Article 9 fund, but it could be that it's they're trying to invest in areas that sort of aid this particular part of the sort of thematic. I think it's important to note that a lot of groups have moved away from the negative screening of both listed and unlisted, and it's much more of the where can we actually move to help to change things, where can our money be helpful in creating change, rather than just, okay, we're not doing that, we're not touching that area because it's bad. So those are the types of things I think groups are thinking about up in the Nordics.
We hear a lot about the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. What other sovereign wealth funds are active in the region?
So, I mean, the Norwegian sovereign wealth, I think there are about $1.5 trillion at the moment, dollars in assets. And historically, they've been very equity heavy. I mean, I think it's 70+% in equities. Actually, quite little in privates. They do have some real estate and some infrastructure. But because of their size and because of their investments within listed equities, they have that ability and power to be more of an activist investor and make changes, which is difficult if you're say a $40-50 billion group and you have 40% in equities or 50% in equities, and you're trying to make a change with your check size. You're never going to get up in those larger companies to the the thresholds that you need to be at to where people actually can listen to what you say. So they are in a unique position, and there's not really that many groups behind them. Then moving into privates, I think it's interesting. I think from what we see, I mean, the private is the easiest place to make change and impact. It's especially private equity. Private debt, more difficult because you don't really have control of the assets in the same way. But in private equity, you can go in there and make changes to the governance and to any ESG criteria that people are looking for. So it's an interesting move, and I think they have the performance has been phenomenal. They've done a great job, and they have a very interesting team, and they have offices across the world. So I think in the region, people do look up to them and the way they do things in general. Other than those, I think there is a bit of consolidation happening, and it has been happening in Denmark for a long time. So the groups are bigger and more punchy. Finland, they do have 4 or 5 pretty large pension and insurance groups who are bringing everyone else in Finland up to kind of the same level, and they have certain scrutiny and stakeholders that they have to abide with. And in Sweden, it's the very well-known buffer funds, the AP funds that I mentioned earlier, or I'll potentially looking to consolidate, but they have sort of made a big mark there, in the sort of carbon emission things going back a few years ago and things like that. So I think there is a little bit of herd mentality up there, and you want to do the best you can do. Family offices. I think you mentioned that part. I think it's on people's minds maybe more than anywhere else, and the sort of new generations coming in. It's a big thing. It's a big thing. So you have to make sure that your mindset is at least there when you're looking at your investments, but from a ESG or input perspective, and you're trying to do the best you can with it. It doesn't have to be that you're just buying green bonds, but that whatever you're investing in, you're trying to do the best you can to improve from an ESG perspective.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about the region and its dynamics?
Well, I think it's interesting for those groups sort of considering raising assets in the Nordics, and what you should be thinking about. And one of those is they have a push from board members and stakeholders to be as compliant as they can be. But before you go there, you have to make sure you have all the reporting requirements from an ESG perspective, because everyone asks for it. You need to be able to show what you're doing in some sort of measured way, and it can't be in the last slide of your pitch book. It needs to be a little bit of front and center. People do think about it. People do talk about it. They know that certain regions in the world are maybe a little bit further behind, but you've got to have your ducks aligned before you start going up there, because they are miles ahead of anyone else in terms of ESG and sustainability.
Well, thank you, Alec. Great to see you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ethan.